Emissions. We look at emissions specifically, and we will be diving deep into this stuff in coming classes. The regulated emissions are HC, which stands for hydrocarbon. It's unburned fuel. Carbon monoxide, it's a C and an O. That's bad, okay? And then NOx, which is oxides of nitrogen. The other emissions we get out are O, oxygen, which should be very low, and CO2, which is carbon dioxide. Now, that in itself is a greenhouse gas. We don't regulate that one yet. My feeling is we're gonna. They're trying, but when we get to the emissions, we'll talk about it. Right. So early in Illinois state testing, 1968 to 1980, we had an idle test, and then 1981 to about 1996, we had the Im240 test, which was done in a treadmill, which like a dyno. And 1995 to present, and starting in about 2003, 2004, all we do at this point is OBD2 testing. Okay. So this is some of the older stuff. I just want to run through this really fast. The idle test, the emissions idle test, generally this was done with a bar 90 machine. It actually showed it. We are going to be breaking these out later in the class. And this was the cut points. This is the failure lines of HC of 220 parts per million, which, honest to God, that's an extremely dirty car. You run that car, you're sitting behind this car at a stoplight, you're going to smell this car. This is going to be a noxious car to be behind. Okay? Couldn't have had to try to drive in one, but honestly, these cars were extremely dirty, and that was the failure line. Anyways, so what we do in the Im240 test is we put the car on the rollers, and then we drive it for 241 seconds, which the reason why they call it the Im240 test, and why they didn't call it the Im241 test, but not my call. And then, we put a big fan up in the front, and literally this big bucket of a sampling hose in the back of the car. Now, we tested everything that came out of the car, including if it was dripping or leaking any gas, that would get picked up as well. And they got pretty sensitive. We actually did quite well. I mean, there was some issues, as this test moved on and the equipment became more and more sensitive, that literally the armor all on the tires would cause an increase in HC. Just the armor all on the tires. New wiper blades would cause an elevated HC level. I remember back in the day having to look at the car and go, oh, look, he sped Vaseline all over his dashboard, and that caused the car to fail miserably in the HC. Not because of what was coming out of the tailpipe, but what was coming off of the dashboard. Crazy. Anyways, we don't do that anymore. Now we plug into the car in the test line. Now, remember, we fail the car at 1.5 times the FTP. But the reason why it knows it's at 1.5 times the FTP is because it sets a check engine light and develops a DTC for it. Okay? Now, this is only done on vehicles made after 1996, but there are cars that are exempt. Really heavy cars. Okay? There are some exemptions to this. All electric, plug-in only, like the Nissan Leaf. That one's not tested. It's got an exemption. Why? Doesn't burn gasoline. Get it? Diesels. Diesels generally don't go through this. Although, I think they're gonna. Anyways. So, OBD2 testing. Now, one of the things we test is O2, EGR, fuel trims, electronic inputs and outputs, catalytic converters, misfires, evaporative secondary air injection. And then, so those are the monitors that we have now. In about 2004, we went to Tier 2, which was an update to the OBD2. It started in about 2002, ran until about 2006. Various manufacturers not able to make the compliance, so Tier 2 didn't really fully, go into, every single car until after about 2005, 2006, somewhere around there. There was a couple of stragglers. But we added in monitors, PCV and thermostat. And we'll talk about those monitors and talk about, we're going to run through every one of these monitors in class for the next couple of weeks. Okay, inputs and outputs. Look at inputs. Inputs are usually sensors, okay? You know, and then outputs are usually, you know, like what it does with this information, you know, diagnostic management, you know, testing, recording test results, test fail actions, that's a good one, requesting defaults, we'll talk more about that. But, you know, this is what we look at, you know, system operation, operating conditions, anyways. Talk more about it later. DLC, okay. So DLC, if we look at it, these pins are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 across the top here, you know, and then 9 through 16 across the bottom. The ones that are required to be in certain spots by, you know, OBD2 mandates are pin 2, okay, that's this guy right here, that's the COM line. And then pins 4 and 5 are ground. It's chassis ground and signal ground. Signal ground generally goes directly to the engine. Some cars not so much. Then we got chassis ground that generally runs underneath the dashboard. Then the other thing we have is pin 16, which is battery power on all the time, 4 amps max. This is what powers up the generic scan tools. That's where they get their power from. So they get power and ground, and then there's a COM line. Now, I've listed out what GM puts on the rest of their pins. Now, this may or may not be different in different manufacturers. This probably is different than other manufacturers, but they still put a lot of the same stuff in a lot of the same place. Okay. All right. Some of the communication LAN protocols. This was, you know, LAN, this was crazy speed, powertrain in real time. Some of these things are so fast that it can fire the injector, the PCMs I'm talking about, they can fire the injector for a specific cylinder, go to sleep, and then wake back up to fire the next injector. So they're, you know, extremely fast. Now, the CAN stuff, this is common language protocols. Again, talk more about this in future classes. It allows the ECM to wake up on its own and put itself into low power mode on its own. CAN stuff has, you know, common language protocols that allows the different computers inside the car to talk to each other, like the IPC, the ABS module, the whatever. Okay, and what I mean by global sharing is on the network they're able to share components. So vehicle speed, ABS needs it, ECU needs it, dashboard needs it, you know, the speedometer. So they can all three of those share that information on the network. Get it? So I need one vehicle speed sensor. That's about it. You okay? Stay tuned for part 2.